Chapter 1. The Invitation. The envelope was thick, its paper heavy and textured, as though imbued with secrets. It arrived without warning, a stark, solitary item in the pristine mailbox. No return address, merely a Gothic script, loopy and ornate, that seemed to dance on the ivory vellum. A chill, inexplicable and profound, crept over her as she tore it open. The paper within was identical to the envelope, filled with words penned in the same eerie script. It was an invitation, a summons to a place she had never known, a house shrouded in shadows and time. The address was a desolate stretch of rural road, a place where the world seemed to end and something else, something ancient and dark, began. Days turned into a blur as she contemplated the peculiar missive. A part of her was drawn to it, a morbid curiosity ignited by the unsettling beauty of the script, by the promise of something unknown. Yet, another part recoiled, sensing a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a malevolent force that sought her out. Fear and fascination warred within her. The house, described in the invitation as a place of solace and respite, was painted in hues of decay and despair. A Gothic mansion, it was said, standing as a sentinel over a barren landscape, its windows like empty eyes staring into the void. Nights were consumed by dreams, or rather, nightmares. Shadows stretched and contorted, taking on grotesque forms. Whispers carried on the wind, promising secrets and damnation. The house in the invitation became a recurrent motif, its silhouette looming over her, a monstrous presence that grew more defined with each passing night. A heavy dread settled upon her. She knew, without a doubt, that accepting this invitation was a mistake, a perilous step into the unknown. But the allure was undeniable, a siren song that pulled her closer to the precipice. Chapter 2. The Old House. The house was a leviathan, a Gothic behemoth that seemed to rise from the earth, a malevolent growth. It stood alone, a stark silhouette against the bleak, unforgiving sky. As she drew closer, its imposing form grew larger, more menacing. The once vibrant green of the surrounding fields had withered, replaced by a sickly pallor, as if the house itself drained life from the land. The architecture was a grotesque blend of beauty and decay. Towering spires and ornate gargoyles contrasted sharply with the crumbling facade, the once pristine stone now stained and weathered. Windows, like vacant eyes, stared out at the world with a chilling indifference. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the mournful whisper of the wind through skeletal trees. As she approached the imposing front door, a cold dread seeped into her bones. The wood was black with age, its surface etched with intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. A brass knocker, cold to the touch, bore an unfamiliar symbol, a haunting glyph that sent shivers down her spine. With trembling hands, she raised the knocker and let it fall. The sound echoed through the house, a hollow, mournful wail that seemed to reverberate through the very core of her being. A moment passed, then another, and still there was no answer. A sense of unease washed over her, intensifying as she fumbled for the key hidden beneath a gargoyle's grimace. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a cavernous hall shrouded in twilight. Dust motes danced in the feeble beams of sunlight that filtered through the grime-covered windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of old wood and forgotten time. A grand staircase, spiraling upward, dominated the space, its steps worn and uneven, as if countless feet had traversed them over centuries. A chill wind swept through the house, igniting gooseflesh on her exposed skin. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, each step a hesitant advance into the unknown. Shadows stretched and danced, taking on grotesque forms in the flickering light. The house was alive, she realized, or perhaps haunted, its presence as palpable as her own. Chapter 3. Unsettling Echoes. The house was a labyrinth of shadows, a maze of decaying grandeur. Each room was a new chapter in a sinister story, filled with dust-covered relics and an oppressive silence. Portraits with vacant eyes hung on cracked walls, their subjects seeming to watch with a cold detachment. Ornate furniture stood like skeletal remains of former opulence, their gilded frames tarnished by time. As she ventured deeper into the house, the temperature seemed to drop, an icy chill that seeped into her bones. The air was thick with an unseen presence, a malevolent force that clung to the shadows. Strange sounds echoed through the house, whispers and murmurs carried on the wind, as if the walls themselves were alive with secrets. The library was a sanctuary of decay. Bookshelves lined the walls, their leather bindings cracked and brittle. Dust motes danced in the dim light, casting eerie shadows on the pages. A grand fireplace, its hearth cold and empty, dominated one wall. As she moved closer, she noticed strange symbols carved into the stone, an alien script that held no meaning for her. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, its ebony frame scarred by time. An inexplicable urge compelled her to approach it. As her fingers brushed the yellowed keys, a haunting melody began to play, a mournful tune that seemed to seep from the depths of the house. It was a melody of loss and despair, a haunting dirge that filled the room with an oppressive sorrow. As the music swelled, the shadows in the room seemed to shift and writhe, taking on grotesque forms. A cold dread seized her as she realized she was not alone. A presence was in the room with her, something ancient and evil, watching her with cold, predatory eyes. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Corner. Night descended upon the house like a tangible entity, its darkness thick and oppressive. The wind howled outside, a mournful dirge that seemed to seep through the cracks in the old house. Shadows stretched and danced, grotesque and menacing, their shapes shifting and contorting in the flickering candlelight. A sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she moved through the shadowy corridors, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Every creak and groan of the house amplified her fear, turning ordinary sounds into sinister symphonies of terror. In the dim light of her candle, she noticed a peculiar discoloration on the wall, a dark stain that seemed to shift and grow. As she drew closer, her blood ran cold. The stain was not a stain at all, but a shadow, a living, breathing shadow that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Fear turned to horror as the shadow began to take shape, elongating and stretching until it resembled a grotesque human form. Its eyes, twin voids of darkness, seemed to fix upon her, boring into her soul. A low growl, deep and guttural, emanated from the shadowy figure, sending shivers down her spine. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her ears. The shadow advanced, its movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. The air grew colder, the pressure in the room intensifying. She could feel its malevolent presence closing in, a suffocating embrace of darkness. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the silent house. The shadow pursued, its relentless pursuit a constant, terrifying companion. She ran, her lungs burning, her legs aching, driven by a primal fear that consumed her. The house seemed to stretch on endlessly, a labyrinth of shadows and despair. She stumbled and fell, her body bruised and aching, but she dared not stop. The shadow was gaining on her, its presence growing stronger with every passing moment. Chapter 5. The Creaking Lullaby. Exhaustion finally claimed her as she collapsed onto a cold, hard floor. The relentless pursuit had drained her strength, leaving her weak and vulnerable. The darkness was complete, broken only by the flickering light of her candle, a tiny beacon against the encroaching shadows. A sense of hopelessness washed over her. The house was a prison, and she was a captive, a helpless prey in a world of predators. The creaking of the old house provided a constant, unsettling soundtrack, a mournful lullaby that seemed to lull her into a false sense of security. Sleep, when it finally came, was a tormented refuge. Dreams, or rather nightmares, consumed her, filled with grotesque images and haunting sounds. The shadow figure from the previous night was a constant presence, its menacing form looming over her, a silent, watchful predator. She woke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The candle had guttered out, leaving her enveloped in darkness. A cold draft swept through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. A noise, a soft scratching sound, came from the corner of the room, a sound that seemed to claw its way into her consciousness. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped her. She reached for the flint and steel, her hands trembling. With shaking fingers, she struck a spark, illuminating the room in a brief flash of light. In that fleeting moment, she saw it, a pair of glowing eyes fixed upon her from the darkness. A scream tore from her throat as the darkness returned, swallowing the terrifying sight. Her heart raced, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. She was alone, or so she thought, in the heart of this haunted house, surrounded by shadows and the promise of unspeakable horrors. Chapter 6. A Taste of Darkness. Hunger gnawed at her, a relentless beast demanding sustenance. Days turned into nights, a blur of fear and exhaustion. She moved through the house like a ghost, a silent specter in a world of shadows. The kitchen was a bleak, sterile space, its once warm heart now cold and empty. With trembling hands, she rummaged through the dusty cupboards, finding only remnants of forgotten meals. A tin of expired biscuits, a jar of empty promises. Despair settled over her as the realization dawned. There was no food. Her body, already weakened by fear, was now a vessel of emptiness. Hallucinations began to creep in, distorted images dancing at the edges of her vision. Shadows took on human shapes, whispering promises of sustenance. The house itself seemed to mock her hunger, the creaking of the floorboards a macabre symphony of starvation. In the darkest hours, a strange craving emerged, a desire for something more than mere sustenance, a hunger for something forbidden, something dark and unnatural. The shadows seemed to beckon, promising a feast of a different kind. Fear and desperation warred within her. She knew that giving in to this craving was a dangerous gamble, a step into the unknown. But the hunger was relentless, a consuming fire that threatened to consume her from within. As darkness enveloped the house once more, she found herself drawn to the basement, a place she had avoided since her arrival. A flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps there, in the depths of the old house, she would find something, anything to satisfy her gnawing hunger. Chapter 7. The Forbidden Attic. The attic was a realm of forgotten things, a dusty tomb filled with the echoes of a bygone era. A narrow, winding staircase led upward, its steps creaking ominously beneath her weight. As she ascended, the air grew colder, thicker with the scent of decay and neglect. The attic was a cavernous space, shrouded in twilight. Cobwebs draped from the rafters like ghostly veils, and dust motes danced in the feeble beams of sunlight that filtered through the grime-covered windows. Trunks and chests, covered in a thick layer of dust, lined the walls, their contents a mystery lost to time. A peculiar scent hung in the air, a sweet, sickly perfume that seemed to grow stronger as she ventured deeper into the attic. It was a scent of decay and corruption, a disturbingly familiar aroma that sent a shiver down her spine. A large, ornate mirror stood in the center of the room, its frame tarnished and cracked. As she approached, her reflection distorted, elongated, and grotesque. Fear gripped her as she realized the figure staring back was not her own. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she turned away, but the image persisted, a haunting echo in her mind. A peculiar object caught her eye, a small, wooden box nestled among the clutter. It was ornate, carved with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and shift. A sense of urgency propelled her forward, a desperate hope that the box held the answers she sought. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Chapter 8. A Glimpse of the Past. The box contained a single item, a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. The script was elegant, flowing across the pages in a graceful dance of ink. As she turned the pages, she was transported to a time long past, a world of opulence and darkness. The journal belonged to the house's former mistress, a woman named Eleanor, a name that seemed to whisper secrets from the grave. Her words painted a portrait of a life filled with both grandeur and despair, a world where beauty and madness coexisted. Eleanor's entries were a chilling chronicle of obsession, a descent into madness. She wrote of shadows that followed her, of whispers in the night, and of a growing darkness that consumed her soul. The house, she revealed, was a prison, a place of torment and despair. There were references to rituals, to sacrifices made to appease an ancient evil that lurked within the walls. The house, it seemed, was a conduit for darkness, a portal to a realm of horror beyond comprehension. As she read on, the line between past and present blurred. The house seemed to close in around her, the walls whispering secrets in the language of shadows. A sense of dread, cold and sharp, gripped her as she realized the truth. She was not alone in this house. The evil that had consumed Eleanor was still there, waiting, watching. The final entry was a chilling confession, a desperate plea for help. Eleanor wrote of a growing darkness within her, a hunger that consumed her soul. She warned of a terrible fate that awaited anyone who dared to enter the house. The words were a chilling epitaph, a final farewell from a woman lost to madness. As she closed the journal, a cold draft swept through the room, carrying with it the scent of fear. A shadow moved in the corner of her eye, a dark shape that seemed to elongate and stretch. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was not alone. The house was awakening, and she was its prey. Chapter 9. The Uninvited Guest. Nights were a descent into madness, a relentless assault on the senses. Sleep was a fleeting respite, interrupted by nightmares that bled into reality. The house creaked and groaned, its mournful symphony a constant companion. Shadows danced and writhed, taking on grotesque forms, their silent menace a tangible presence. One night, as she lay awake, listening to the house's mournful dirge, a sound broke through the silence. A footstep, soft and deliberate, echoed from the floor above. Her heart pounded in her chest as a cold dread washed over her. She was not alone. Fear propelled her from bed, her body trembling as she ascended the creaking stairs. The darkness was impenetrable, broken only by the dim glow of the moon filtering through the grimy windows. With each step, her heart pounded louder, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. As she reached the top of the stairs, a chill wind swept through the hallway, carrying with it the scent of decay. The air was thick with an unseen presence, a malevolent force that seemed to emanate from the shadows. A door creaked open, a sliver of light illuminating the darkness. With a trembling hand, she reached for the doorknob, her mind a whirlwind of terror. The door swung open, revealing a room bathed in moonlight. A figure stood at the window, its back turned to her. A cold dread seized her as she recognized the shape, a silhouette familiar yet terrifying. The figure turned, and a scream tore from her throat. The face that met her gaze was a grotesque mask of horror, a visage from the depths of her nightmares. The creature was tall and gaunt, its eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. Its skin was pale and translucent, veined with a sickly green. The creature smiled, a chilling, inhuman sound that echoed through the room. Its voice was a whisper, carried on the wind, a promise of unspeakable horrors. She turned and fled, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature was gaining on her, its footsteps echoing behind her. The house seemed to close in around her, a labyrinth of terror. She stumbled and fell, her body aching, her spirit broken. The creature was upon her, its shadow looming over her, a cold, suffocating embrace. Chapter 10. A House Divided. The house was no longer a mere dwelling. It was a battleground, a place of shadows and terror. The line between sanity and madness blurred with each passing moment. The creature, a malevolent force, had claimed a foothold, its presence a palpable weight in the suffocating atmosphere. Days turned into a blur of survival, relentless struggle against an unseen enemy. She moved through the house with caution, every creak and groan a potential threat. The once familiar rooms had transformed into alien spaces, filled with shadows that seemed to shift and grow with each passing hour. Sleep was a luxury denied, replaced by a constant state of hypervigilance. The house was alive with whispers, the soft rustle of unseen beings moving through the darkness. A cold dread permeated her being, a constant companion that never left her side. The house itself seemed to be changing, its structure shifting and morphing. Doors appeared where there had been none, and walls seemed to breathe, their surfaces undulating with a sinister life of their own. The once grand rooms were now labyrinthine, a maze of shadows and despair. A sense of isolation crept into her mind. The world outside had become a distant memory, replaced by the claustrophobic confines of this haunted house. She was alone, truly alone, in a battle against an ancient evil that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The house was divided, a battleground between light and darkness, between sanity and madness. And she was caught in the crossfire, a helpless pawn in a terrifying game. Chapter 11. The Night Terror. The night was a living entity, a malevolent force that seeped into her bones. Darkness was a tangible presence, a suffocating blanket that smothered her senses. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a constant state of hypervigilance. Every creak, every whisper, was a potential threat, a harbinger of the terror that lurked in the shadows. Her mind, once a sanctuary of thoughts and dreams, was now a battleground, a chaotic arena where fear and desperation wrestled for dominance. Hallucinations became her constant companions, grotesque visions that danced at the edges of her perception. Shadows took on sinister shapes, their movements fluid and purposeful, as if imbued with a malevolent intelligence. The house itself seemed to amplify the terror, its creaks and groans a mournful symphony of despair. Walls whispered secrets, their voices carried on the wind, a chilling cacophony that filled her mind with dread. The air was thick with the scent of fear, a pungent odor that clung to her skin like a second skin. As the night deepened, a cold dread settled over her, a premonition of impending doom. The house seemed to hold its breath, a silent, expectant pause before the storm. A sense of impending violence hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that stretched her nerves to their breaking point. The creature, her unseen tormentor, was a constant presence, a shadow lurking in the periphery of her vision. Its absence was as terrifying as its presence, a silent threat that hung over her like a guillotine. She was trapped, a prisoner in her own mind, a captive in a house of horrors. The night stretched on, an eternity of fear and despair. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow deeper, the silence more profound. And as dawn approached, a sense of hopelessness washed over her, a cold, despairing realization that there was no escape. The nightmare was far from over. Chapter 12. A cry in the dark. A sound shattered the night, a piercing cry that echoed through the house, a desperate plea for help. Her heart pounded in her chest as a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. The cry was not human, a guttural, animalistic sound that chilled her blood. Fear propelled her into action, her body moving on autopilot as she raced through the darkened corridors. The cry grew louder, closer, more desperate. A sense of urgency consumed her, a primal instinct to protect, to save. The source of the sound was a room on the upper floor, a room she had avoided since her arrival. With trembling hands, she fumbled for the doorknob, her mind a whirlwind of terror. The door creaked open, revealing a scene of unimaginable horror. In the center of the room stood a figure, a grotesque amalgamation of human and shadow. Its form was elongated, its skin pale and translucent, but it was the eyes that haunted her, twin pools of darkness that seemed to pierce her soul. In its arms was a child, a small, frail creature with eyes wide with terror. The child was struggling, its cries echoing through the room, a desperate plea for rescue. The creature, with a cold, inhuman smile, looked at her, its eyes filled with a predatory hunger. Time seemed to slow as she took in the horrific scene. The child was in mortal danger, a helpless victim in the clutches of a malevolent force. A surge of protectiveness ignited within her, a fierce determination to save the innocent. With a courage she never knew she possessed, she moved forward, her voice a whisper in the face of overwhelming terror. The battle for the child's life was about to begin. Chapter 13. The Unseen Presence. The creature was a wall of darkness, its form shifting and amorphous. Its eyes, twin voids of malevolence, were fixed on her with a cold, predatory intensity. The child, a tiny, helpless figure, was a shield, a fragile barrier between her and the abyss. A battle erupted, a silent, desperate struggle for the soul of innocence. She fought with a ferocity born of desperation, her hands clawing at the creature's shadowy form. The air was thick with the scent of fear, a pungent odor that mingled with the acrid tang of evil. The child screamed, a heart-wrenching sound that echoed through the room. The creature responded with a guttural growl, its grip tightening on the small body. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, as if the house itself was conspiring against her. A sense of powerlessness washed over her, a cold, despairing realization that she was no match for this ancient evil. The creature was gaining ground, its grip tightening, its form growing larger, more menacing. A flicker of hope ignited within her, a desperate gamble. With a final surge of adrenaline, she lunged forward, her hands reaching for the child. The creature reacted, its form shifting to block her path. The child screamed again, a cry that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. In that moment, something shifted, a subtle change in the atmosphere. A presence, unseen yet tangible, entered the room. A cold, otherworldly energy filled the space, a force that clashed with the creature's malevolence. The creature hesitated, its form flickering and wavering. The child's cries grew weaker, a fading echo of terror. Time seemed to stand still as the two forces battled for supremacy. The outcome would determine the fate of the child, and perhaps her own. Chapter 14. The Ritual. The room transformed, a kaleidoscope of shadows and light. The walls seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling vortex of color. The air grew cold, a chilling wind that carried the scent of decay and sulfur. The creature, its form distorted and elongated, was engulfed by the vortex, its screams a haunting echo in the silence. The child, limp and lifeless, lay in her arms, a fragile burden. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of fear and despair. The unseen presence, a benevolent force, filled the room, a comforting warmth in the face of overwhelming terror. A sense of purpose ignited within her, a determination to save the child. She focused her mind, channeling her energy into a single point. The child's body began to glow, a soft, ethereal light that filled the room. A voice, ancient and wise, whispered in her mind, guiding her through the process. The world faded away, replaced by a realm of pure energy. She was a conduit, a vessel for a sacred ritual, a battle between life and death. The child's body trembled, convulsing with a silent storm. The glow intensified, a beacon of hope in the darkness. The unseen presence, a guardian angel, stood beside her, its energy merging with her own. Time seemed to stand still as the ritual reached its climax. A blinding light filled the room, followed by a deafening silence. When her vision cleared, the child lay in her arms, breathing softly, a miracle of life reborn. The room returned to normal, the walls solid once more. The creature was gone, vanished without a trace. The child was alive, a symbol of hope in a world of darkness. Exhaustion washed over her, a physical and emotional collapse. She cradled the child in her arms, a fragile life entrusted to her care. The house, once a place of terror, now held a promise of redemption. The battle was not over, but for now, the darkness had been repelled. A new chapter was beginning. Chapter 15, The Dark Secret. A fragile peace settled over the house, a tentative calm in the aftermath of chaos. The child, now named Alara, was a beacon of hope, a tiny spark in the darkness. Yet, a sense of unease lingered, a shadow cast by the unknown. Driven by a need for answers, she returned to the library, a place of both knowledge and dread. The old journal lay open on the worn wooden desk, its pages filled with Eleanor's chilling confessions. As she delved deeper into the text, a disturbing pattern emerged. The house was more than just a haunted dwelling. It was a vessel, a conduit for a dark ritual. Eleanor, in her madness, had become obsessed with immortality, a desperate quest to cheat death. Her experiments had unleashed forces beyond her control, summoning entities from the darkest corners of the universe. The child, she realized with a shock, was a result of these horrific rituals, a product of darkness and despair. Fear and revulsion warred within her. The woman who had written these words was a stranger, yet her madness echoed in the depths of her own mind. A chilling realization dawned. The evil that had possessed Eleanor was not gone. It was dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The house was a prison, not just for its inhabitants, but for the darkness that lurked within its walls. She was a prisoner, a caretaker of a terrible secret, a custodian of a legacy of horror. The weight of this knowledge was crushing, a burden she was not sure she could bear. With a heavy heart, she closed the journal. The answers she sought were terrifying, a chasm of darkness that threatened to consume her. The child, a symbol of hope, was also a reminder of the horror that had created her. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and unknowns. But one thing was clear: the battle was far from over. The house was a living entity, a malevolent force that would not be easily defeated. And so, she prepared herself for what lay ahead, a confrontation with the darkness that had haunted this house for centuries. The reckoning was coming. Chapter 16, Faces in the mirror. The mirror was a portal to another world, a reflection of the soul distorted by the house's malevolent energy. As she gazed into its depths, she was confronted with not her own image, but a grotesque caricature, a distorted reflection of her fears. The face staring back was gaunt and hollow-eyed, a mask of despair etched into the skin. The eyes, once a clear blue, were now shadowed with darkness, filled with a haunting emptiness. The reflection was a stranger, a distorted version of herself, a victim of the house's insidious influence. Fear and self-loathing warred within her. The image in the mirror was a constant reminder of the darkness that consumed her, a chilling reflection of her own vulnerability. The house was changing her, molding her into something monstrous, a creature of shadow and despair. The mirror became an obsession, a daily ritual of self-destruction. She spent hours staring into its depths, searching for a glimpse of the woman she once was. But the reflection remained constant, a haunting reminder of her descent into madness. The house itself seemed to encourage her obsession, the mirrors in every room becoming portals to a world of horror. Shadows danced and writhed within the reflective surfaces, taking on grotesque forms. Faces appeared, fleeting glimpses of the unknown, haunting her dreams and waking hours. A sense of isolation deepened, a growing detachment from reality. The world outside the house became a distant memory, replaced by the claustrophobic confines of her own mind. The mirror was her only companion, a silent witness to her descent into madness. The fear of what she might become was a constant presence, a shadow that lurked in the corners of her mind. The house was winning, its malevolent energy slowly consuming her soul. Yet, a flicker of hope remained, a desperate belief that she could break free from its clutches. The battle for her sanity was far from over. The mirror was a battlefield, and she was the sole combatant. Chapter 17. The Final Confrontation. The house was a fortress, a battleground between light and darkness. With Alara safe, a sense of purpose ignited within her. The final confrontation was inevitable, a clash of wills between her and the ancient evil that haunted the house. Preparations were made with a grim determination. Every room was searched, every corner examined. The house was fortified, its defenses strengthened against the impending siege. The journal became her guide, a roadmap through the labyrinth of darkness. The night of the confrontation arrived, a cold, moonless expanse that seemed to mirror the darkness within the house. A sense of calm washed over her, a strange serenity in the face of impending terror. The house was alive with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of fear and decay. As the clock struck midnight, the house erupted in chaos. Doors slammed, windows rattled, and shadows danced with a sinister purpose. The creature, its presence palpable, was awakening. A low growl echoed through the house, a primal sound that chilled her blood. The confrontation began in the grand hall, a battleground chosen by the house itself. The creature emerged from the shadows, its form grotesque and imposing. Its eyes, twin voids of darkness, burned with an inhuman intensity. The battle was a blur of motion, a clash of wills. She fought with a ferocity born of desperation, her every move calculated, every strike aimed with deadly precision. The creature was a relentless adversary, its strength and speed inhuman. The house itself became a weapon, its structure shifting and morphing to aid the creature. The floorboards buckled, the walls seemed to close in, creating a deadly maze. Yet, she persisted, her determination unwavering. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The air was thick with the scent of fear and blood, a choking miasma that filled her lungs. Her body ached, her strength waning, but her spirit remained unbroken. With a final, desperate effort, she unleashed the full force of her will. A surge of energy erupted from within her, a blinding light that filled the room. The creature screamed, its form dissolving into a swirling vortex of darkness. The house shuddered, as if releasing a pent-up breath. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. The battle was over. Exhausted and injured, she collapsed to the floor, her body trembling. The house was still, the darkness vanquished. A new dawn was approaching, a dawn of hope and rebirth. The house was no longer a prison, but a place of liberation. The nightmare was finally over. Or was it? Chapter 18. Breaking Free. Dawn broke, casting its pale light into the house. The once oppressive darkness was now a retreating shadow, a vanquished foe. The house, stripped of its malevolent energy, seemed to sigh in relief, its creaks and groans replaced by a gentle rustling. With Alara safe in her arms, she ventured outside, into the world she had almost forgotten. The morning air was crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the house. The sun, a golden orb, offered warmth and hope, a promise of new beginnings. The house, from a distance, looked different, its imposing form softened by the morning light. It was still a place of shadows, but now they were shadows of the past, remnants of a nightmare fading into memory. A sense of liberation washed over her, a feeling of freedom she had not experienced in what felt like years. The world was vast and open, filled with possibilities. Yet, a part of her was reluctant to leave the house, a fear of the unknown lurking in the shadows of her mind. The house was a part of her now, a living entity with a history both tragic and terrifying. She had a duty to protect it, to ensure that the darkness would never return. With Alara as her inspiration, she would transform the house, turning it from a place of horror into a sanctuary of hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles. But with each step away from the house, she felt a growing sense of strength, a determination to rebuild her life. The darkness had tried to consume her, but it had failed. She was a survivor, a warrior who had emerged from the battle scarred but unbroken. The world was waiting, a canvas on which she could paint a new future. With Alara by her side, she would face whatever challenges lay ahead, her spirit unbroken, her hope undying. The house would remain, a constant reminder of the darkness she had conquered. But it would also be a symbol of her resilience, a testament to the human spirit's indomitable power. The journey to healing had begun. A new chapter was about to be written, a chapter filled with light. Chapter 19. The Aftermath. The house stood as a sentinel, a silent witness to the horrors it had endured. Its facade, once imposing and sinister, now held a different aura, a blend of resilience and vulnerability. The garden, once barren and lifeless, was beginning to show signs of life, a testament to the healing power of time. Alara thrived in the sunlight, her laughter a melody that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. The house, once a prison, was now her sanctuary, a place of love and growth. With each passing day, the memories of the horrors endured faded, replaced by the warmth of new beginnings. Yet, the shadows of the past persisted, a faint echo in the depths of her mind. The house, despite its transformation, held secrets, remnants of a history steeped in darkness. She was a guardian, a protector of a place that had once been a vessel for evil. The world outside beckoned, offering opportunities and adventures. But the house was a part of her, a living entity with which she shared a unique bond. It was a place of healing, a foundation upon which she could build her future. Night brought a different kind of peace. The house, bathed in moonlight, took on a serene beauty. The shadows that once held terror now seemed to whisper tales of resilience, of a battle won against unimaginable odds. As she watched Alara sleep, a sense of gratitude washed over her. She had been given a second chance, a gift beyond measure. The darkness had tried to consume her, but it had failed. She was a survivor, a woman reborn from the ashes of despair. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities. But she faced the future with courage, her heart filled with hope. The house would always be a part of her, a constant reminder of the darkness she had conquered. But it would also be a symbol of her strength, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. And so, life went on, a delicate balance of past and future, of darkness and light. The house stood as a guardian, watching over its inhabitants, a silent sentinel in a world that was constantly changing. The aftermath was a process, a journey of healing and renewal. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a story of hope emerging from the depths of despair. The house was no longer haunted. It was a home, and in that home, a new life was blossoming, a life filled with love, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow, the end, or perhaps the beginning. Chapter 20. Echoes of the Past. Time moved forward, a gentle current carrying them through the days. The house, once a vessel of darkness, became a sanctuary of love and laughter. Alara grew, her spirit as bright as the sunlight that filled the rooms. The garden flourished, a riot of color that mirrored the joy within their hearts. Yet, the house held secrets, whispers of the past that lingered in the shadows. Sometimes, at twilight, when the world was hushed, she would feel a presence, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the house was breathing, its history echoing through the walls. In the quiet moments, she would sit by the old fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The house seemed to come alive, its history unfolding before her eyes. She saw Eleanor, a tragic figure caught in the grip of madness. She felt the desperation of those who had come before, their hopes and fears intertwined with the house's very essence. The house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a living entity, a keeper of memories. Its walls held the echoes of laughter and tears, of love and loss. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a symbol of resilience and hope. As the years passed, the house became a place of pilgrimage, a sanctuary for those seeking solace. Its story was whispered in hushed tones, a legend of darkness and redemption. Visitors came from far and wide, drawn to its unique energy, its aura of peace and tranquility. She became the guardian of the house, a caretaker of its history. She shared its story with those who sought it, offering hope and inspiration to those who had lost their way. The house, under her care, became a beacon of light, a place where the wounds of the past could heal. With each passing year, the echoes of the past grew fainter, replaced by the symphony of life. The house, once a prisoner of darkness, was now a celebration of light. It was a place where love resided, where hope flourished, and where the spirit of human resilience found its home. And so, the house stood, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a symbol of hope in a world often shrouded in darkness. It was more than just a building. It was a living, breathing entity, a keeper of memories, a sanctuary of the soul. And as the sun set on another day, casting long shadows across the land, the house stood tall, its silhouette a promise of enduring strength, a symbol of a past conquered and a future embraced. The echoes of the past would never truly fade, but they were now accompanied by the symphony of a new beginning, a harmonious blend of sorrow and joy, darkness and light. The house lived on, its story a testament to the human spirit's unyielding hope. And in its heart, a flame burned brightly, a beacon for all who sought solace in the face of life's storms. The end, or perhaps the beginning of a new story.